Hello and welcome. I'm Tohit. Today, I believe we are already in a complex period of heightened global tensions, although it hasn't been officially declared as a World War III situation. But I seriously hope this shouldn't occur ever before any time. Today, the rule based world order is facing significant challenges, and instances of violence are on the rise, prompting countries to rethink their relationships. World affairs are changing rapidly, with many countries being exposed by their fragile policies. The threat to countries and the regions that struggle over the control of geographical entities with an international and global dimension is growing. Any moment, the world can expect a major escalation. When I look around and observe, I can see signs that the global order to maintain peace is facing considerable strain. Maybe even you could push yourself to think and find why or when. But from my perspective, the global landscape currently exhibits characteristics of intense geopolitical competition and regional conflicts, even if not formally declared Third World War. We are already on a track with a significant risk, and it was 80 years ago when the weapons went silent after World War II. I prefer to talk about the present or probably the future, but obviously not about the past, when I believe it doesn't make sense to who, what, and when happened the past can relate to today. Everything has changed after World War II. Friendly countries have turned into hard enemies, vice versa. In today's world, the rule based order is in retreat and violence is on the rise, forcing countries to rethink their relationship. World affairs are changing rapidly, with many countries being exposed by their fragile policies. As global tensions are cautiously rising, many people in America and Europe already fear a real Third World War. A recent poll shows many believe it could happen anytime soon. So every country has its own military, army, navy, etc., with most of them in the race to be building the world's strongest military, while evolving technology is playing a very crucial role such as drones, robots, use of AI and high-tech weapons with the primary intent to create damage. This month sees the 80th anniversary of Victory Europe Day, which marked the end of hostilities in Europe following the surrender of Nazi Germany on May 8, 1945, the end of World War II. 8 decades after the last Great War, the prospect of another global conflict haunts the continent once again, with a new YouGo survey conducted in Britain, France, Germany, Italy, and Spain, showing that between 41 to 55% of each country think that another world war is to occur within 5 to 10 years. Across the Atlantic in the USA, 45% of Americans share this. In the event that a new world war might occur, the large majority, 68 to 76%, expect that the conflict would involve the use of nuclear weapons. For this reason, it is no surprise to see that most people, 57 to 73%, think that a further world war would have a higher casualty count than previously had. Indeed, this includes sizable number, 25 to 45%, who believe this another conflict in the next 5-10 years would result in deaths of most people in the world. So let's get into the role of United Nations. Founded in 1945, the UN aims to maintain international peace and security, develop friendly relations among states, promote international cooperation, and serve as a center for coordinating global action. The fundamental purpose of establishing the UN, whose founders lived through the destruction of 2 world wars, is to protect future generations from wars. No one can deny the good work that the UN system and the agencies do. From providing immunization to sheltering refugees, the UN has also been a norm setter when member states have allowed it. Time and again, it has expanded its ambit to tackle new challenges such as AIDS, sustainable development goals, climate change, and big data. Since its inception, we luckily have not had another world war in the same global sustained manner. However, we are already on the brink of one. If the UN fails to tackle the ongoing geopolitical conflicts and the humanitarian crisis that threaten the international peace and security on daily basis. The repeated misuse of veto power by the permanent members of the UN Security Council for their own purposes has raised questions about the credibility of the UN. Maintaining peace and security is crucial to preventing poverty and high numbers of refugees. With an increasing number of territories becoming conflict zones, the number of poor and displaced people is on the rise, causing the spread of disease and halt to economic progress. Preventive diplomacy and demilitarization are the two key tactics for avoiding conflicts. Preventive diplomacy is defined as those actions undertaken to avoid conflicts from forming or worsening. It can also help to limit the spread of existing hostilities. Mediation, conciliation, or negotiations are all options to tackle this world issue. Sadly, wars and conflicts are at the top of the list of greatest world issues. In the face of Russia-Ukraine and Israel-Hamas war, along with increasing global problems, the UN has repeatedly found it challenging to organize suitable multilateral responses. There is a growing sentiment around the world that the UN has increasingly become incapable and ineffective as an organization. So what is a ceasefire? Ceasefire is an agreement usually between armies or countries to stop fighting in order to allow discussions about peace. So I think ceasefire is always good to stop the fighting, but without ending and solving the root cause of the conflict, the ceasefire does not have much time to last under different circumstances. Most of the current major conflicts had stopped before with the ceasefire. Therefore, it gave them time to settle the issue and come up with a mutual understanding to stop fighting. Rather, someone chose to fight back again and break the ceasefire. We can't blame a particular party at this point for not keeping the peace because both had the chance to solve the problem. So nowadays, there is a lot of talk about a ceasefire in most of the major conflicts. If that happens, the region can be back to peace. But I have a significant doubt that the several leaders of those countries will agree on normalizing conflict, or that the ceasefire is going to be implemented anytime soon. And if it does, it might not last much time. Russia and Ukraine ceasefire. The war between Russia and Ukraine first began in February 2014 with the invasion of the Ukrainian Autonomous Republic of Crimea by Russian troops. On February 24, 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Although Russian forces made significant gains in the first day of combat, Ukrainian defenders turned down attempts to seize Kiev and other major cities and were soon launching counterattacks at Russian positions. Russia still occupies roughly 20% of the country after gaining over 4,000 kilometers of territory in 2024. According to figures released by Kyiv, UN statistics, and open source data published by BBC Russia, the death toll of Ukrainian and Russian soldiers as well as Ukrainian civilians stood at more than 158,000 as for March 31, 2025. The true numbers of Ukrainians and Russians who have been killed, however, is almost certainly far higher. Russian officials tell people not to call the Ukrainian invasion as a war, but instead a special military operation. Both countries are eager to present their own ceasefire proposals, and in recent years, many ceasefire attempts were presented at UNSC and with the help of mediator countries but failed to be implemented. As Russia held Victory Day parade, as war with Ukraine raging on, Putin, Xi, and nearly 30 friendly world leaders celebrated Russia's Victory Day at Moscow parade. It was seen by many as a show of strength to the world. The guest of honor was the Chinese leader Xi Jinping, while other country leaders from Belarus, Brazil, Egypt, Serbia, Venezuela, and the Palestinian Authority were all in attendance. Also, the leader of Slovakia, a European Union member state, was in Moscow on Friday. In the latest on the ceasefire, Russia has called for direct negotiations with Ukraine in Istanbul, Turkey on May 15. Meanwhile, the European leaders of Poland, the UK, France, and Germany joined the Ukrainian Kyiv for the meeting of Coalition of Willing, giving Russia the message to agree to an unconditional 30-day ceasefire now or face massive sanctions and weapons transfer to Ukraine. They agreed that from Monday, May 12th, a full and unconditional ceasefire must start for at least 30 days. But here, more bad things are happening on the ground. As Ukraine says, Russia fired more than 100 drones overnight despite attempts from Kyiv allies to get Moscow to begin a 30-day ceasefire, and the prospect of direct talks proposed by Russia this week in the Turkey Istanbul. Vladimir Putin has rejected the ultimatum by European leaders to agree to a ceasefire with Ukraine, but has proposed holding direct negotiations with Kyiv this week. Zelensky says he is ready to meet Putin, while it's unlikely that Putin will attend, but we can hope for good in the upcoming negotiations. Israel versus Palestine, including Gaza ceasefire. Now we turn to the Israel-Palestinian war and what's particularly happening in Gaza. The so-called Holy Land has turned into a land of mass destruction and killing, while many still debate the terminology, is it or not a genocide. Israel continues its relentless destruction of life in Gaza through attacks by land, air and sea, displacing and massacring the living population. The Israel-Palestine conflict dates back to the end of 19th century. It is not that much of complicated as presented by many, but simply its foundation is based on occupation by Israel. From Gaza, Hamas launched its deadly attack on Israel October 7, 2023, killing more than 1,300 Israelis, injuring 3,300 and taking hundreds of hostages, prompting the Israel Defense Forces IDF to engage in aerial campaigns and ground operation with the Gaza Strip. After October 7, in Gaza, at least 60,000 people, including more than 17,000 children, have been killed, and more than 100,000 people injured, while missing and presumed dead are more than 14,000, still believed to be trapped under the rubble or in the areas inaccessible to rescuers. The latest figures from the Palestinian Ministry of Health in the occupied West Bank are at least 905 people killed, including 181 children and more than 7,000 people injured. On January 15, 2025, the United States, Egypt and Qatar announced that they had mediated a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas to end 15 months of fighting in Gaza. Hamas released 33 of remaining hostages, while Israel released hundreds of Palestinians from Israeli jails. Displaced residents were allowed to return to northern Gaza, and 600 humanitarian aid trucks were permitted to enter the territory each day. However, Israel launched a wave of strikes and ground operations in central and southern Gaza on March 18, bringing an end to the 6-week ceasefire. Since the collapse of the ceasefire in Gaza, intense Israeli forces activities escalated, resulting in thousands of civilians killed and injured, further damage and destruction to civilian infrastructure, and new waves of forced displacement. Humanitarian aid and supplies have not entered the Gaza Strip for over 9 weeks now, since March 2, when the Israeli authorities imposed a siege. As a result, basic humanitarian supplies including food, fuel, medical aid and vaccine for children are rapidly running out. UNRWA flour and food parcels have run out, and over 1/3 of essential medical supplies are already out of stock. This is having a devastating impact on the population, particularly on vulnerable groups, including children, women, and the elderly. Israel's blockade threatens the entire population of the Gaza Strip with famine and faces 500,000 with starvation, a global hunger monitor has warned. All 2.1 million people in the Gaza Strip are at a critical risk if the Israel blockade continues, says a report by the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification Initiative, released on Monday. In the latest, Hamas released an Israeli-American hostage, Idan Alexander, as a part of good faith gesture in the response to the mediation efforts by United States, Egypt and Qatar. The Israeli Prime Minister's office said the country remained committed to all of its war objectives, and the Israeli officials said the offensive will continue until the remaining hostages are freed and Gaza is demilitarized. Hamas insists it will free hostages only as a part of a deal to end the war and has rejected demand to lay down its arm. Recently, Israel Security Cabinet has unanimously approved a plan to significantly broaden its military offensive against Hamas in the Gaza Strip. The approved strategy reportedly includes conquering Gaza and holding the territories once implemented. The implementation of the plan might begin after the US President Donald Trump's regional Middle East tour. It has started with the visit to Saudi Arabia on Tuesday, followed by the visit to Qatar and the United Arab Emirates that stretch until May 16. These meetings focus on major economic deals and shifting US foreign policy towards regional diplomacy. Some key highlights include a 600 billion Saudi investment in US industries, a historic meet with Syrian interim president, the first in 25 years, and the lifting of US sanctions on Syria. In Qatar, Trump oversaw a 200 billion Boeing deal. The visit emphasizes economic partnership and diplomatic resets over traditional security concerns. Many see this US officials' visit as an effort by these Middle East nations to bring peace to the region. Until then, ceasefire and hostage release negotiations with Hamas might continue as Israel sends mediator to Qatar for Gaza truce talks. Along with these developments, a lot is happening in Middle East. A fourth round of talks between US and Iran over nuclear program has taken place in Oman. It seems the Houthis' attack from Yemen won't be resolved until Israel agrees to renewed ceasefire in Gaza. Now let's talk about India-Pakistan ceasefire. After the 1947 partition of British India, India and Pakistan have experienced numerous conflicts over the decades. However, the current escalation has emerged during a particularly critical period in global affairs, adding to its complexity and potential consequences. A deadly militant attack on the 22 April in Pahalgam, Indian administered Kashmir, which left 25 Indians and one Nepali national dead, triggered a sharp escalation between India and Pakistan, with both sides exchanging gunfire at the line of control and downgrading diplomatic ties. On May 6, India announced the launch of Operation Sindoor, a military strike targeting 9 sites in Pakistan and Pakistan administered Jammu and Kashmir, which it claimed were used to plan the attacks. The situation heightened fear of a broader military conflict between the two nuclear-armed nations, marking the most significant bilateral confrontations since 2019. In the wake of the attack, tit-for-tat measures by India and Pakistan has driven bilateral relations to their lowest point in recent years. New Delhi first took measures to downgrade ties with Pakistan, suspending the Indus Water Treaty, terminating a visa-free travel scheme with Pakistan, and closing the Atari border crossing between the two countries. In turn, Pakistan rejected the suspension of water treaty, warning that any attempts to alter Pakistan-Indus river flow would be considered an act of war. Islamabad also moved to close Pakistani airspace to all Indian commercial airlines, halted a specific visa scheme for Indian citizens, and suspended bilateral trade. The conflict has resulted in significant casualties on both sides. In India, at least 15 civilians were killed by Pakistani shelling in Jammu and Kashmir, including children, while some estimates suggest that between 5 to 15 Indian soldiers might have also lost their lives. Indian authorities additionally claim that over 100 militants were killed in the counter-terrorism operation. On the Pakistan side, at least 31 civilians died due to the Indian strikes across areas such as Punjab and Pakistan-administered Kashmir, with estimates of 33 to 40 Pakistani military personnel killed, though these numbers may be subjected to change as more details emerge. US claimed that it played key role in brokering ceasefire between the nuclear-armed neighbors, and now it appears to have held so far, as India and Pakistan both claim victories after the ceasefire was declared. Earlier on this Monday, top military officials from India and Pakistan discussed finer details of the ceasefire agreed between them over the weekend. According to the Indian Army, the two sides spoke about the need to refrain from any aggression and action. Increasing Western military support to the India and the Chinese to the Pakistan signals a shift in global alignments and another potential flashpoint for international tensions between two nuclear countries in the region. While the celebrations were seen in both sides, Kashmiri residents from both India and Pakistan are still being hopeful for a permanent solution over the disputed territory. The 5 day conflict struck deep into both countries, reaching major cities for the first time in decades, with the majority of deaths in Pakistan. On Wednesday, India exchanged a Pakistani paramilitary fighter for a border security guard that Pakistan had held for weeks. Each officer had been detained before the country's military clash started. Like before, the ceasefire is seen as no guarantee of lasting peace, as many have serious doubts because the core issue that fuels the hostility between the two countries still remains unsolved. The evolving global conflicts. Global conflict levels have dramatically increased in recent years, with more conflicts ongoing than any time since World War II. This trend is fueled by factors like new geopolitical tensions, technological advancements, hybrid threats, and climate change. While there are growing concerns about countries and regions still facing the threat of expanding conflicts in the coming days, the current developing scenario illustrates how escalating rivalries, the collapse of globalization, and the decline of multilateral institutions could reshape international relations and economic landscape. The future of world order is expected to depend largely on the outcome of the current ongoing wars. Thank you for watching. Take care.